Howdy folks, it is Scanner here. Today's video is going to be a Trench Crusade Mysteries, one of my favorite videos to do during this, let's call it a small drought on the official lore side of things. So in Trench Crusade Mysteries, what I always do is just kind of pick something that I find very interesting about the world of Trench Crusade that is obviously mysterious and talk about it from an in-game lore and a game design point of view. And inevitably, somebody gets mad at me by the end of the video. So I really enjoy them. What I want to talk about today is how many gates of hell there are in the world of Trench Crusade. I've been thinking about this one quite a lot, and I find it fascinating and interesting from both a lore and design point of view. So the gates of hell are the means by which the forces of hell get to Earth, but they are not the only means. And there's been mention of small rents in reality that connect hell and Earth, and people get kidnapped through them and accidentally fall through them and end up in the weird, kind of strange geometries of the Temple of the Metamorphosis, and monsters come through from the other side, and that's what leads to similarities between like myths and legends all across the planet. So for this video, we're going to be focusing on the concept of large formalized notions of the gates of hell. So based on the established and formal lore from the developers, we can assume that there are at least 3 distinct types of gates. First of all, there's the Gate of Jerusalem type. This, I would argue, is going to be the rarest type, in that it is stabilized in a fixed location and that it's permanently open. Then there's the second type, which is the migrating northern gate, and I would argue that this will be the second rarest type of gate. It blinks in and out of existence and it moves around the place, but it's in a reasonably localized area. And then we have the third type of gate, which is the gate at Devil's Punch Bowl in Era. This we can assume is the most common type of gate, in that it's closed. It requires some form of interventionist ritual to open. In the lore, it was opened by a massive blood sacrifice, which is why I'm kind of choosing to assume that that's the mechanism by which all the gates are opened. Now, that may not be the case. There could be artifacts with a suitable volume of stored goethic energy within them that they can then unleash, but that feels very kind of tactical and something that hell would potentially adopt as time goes on, or has maybe yet to fully unleash within the war by the time of 1914. We know that hell moves pretty slowly a lot of the time, and based on Era's invasion's need for a live sacrifice, which was basically just 100 years ago within the lore. So it's just like very logistically tough to organize that kind of thing, we can imagine. So if there was an easier way to do it, they would do that. The fact that they didn't do that in Era implies there's not an easier way to do that. That's the logic that I'm applying there. So broadly, basically, we can consider proper gates to hell to be fixed and local, unfixed and wandering, or closed. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about the gates of hell in real theology and mythology, just to kind of get that out of the way. We should always look at the real world religious versions of these things before we start kind of talking about them too much in the Trench Crusade lens. So in Christianity, basically, there's no real gates of hell, despite the term being used in Matthew 16:18. The common consensus that the Bible quote, "And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it," is Jesus saying that the faith people feel in life will carry on to death, and that the afterlife, as it's considered through a Christian lens, is part of the same existence as life. So basically saying, if you believe in me here, you'll believe in me there. If your faith is true, it will follow through death. And death is not a barrier to the faith. It's not a barrier to the church and the faith that I am building here. Even that I tell you that you are Peter bit, it kind of backs up the notion ever so slightly, but it's not like Jesus is telling Peter, he's like, this is your role now, or this is your name now, or whatever. Peter was always Peter. It's Jesus saying, look, man, you know for a fact that your name is Peter. And this other thing that I'm telling you now about my church, you can consider that to be treated as a similar truth. You have been Peter all your life. You being Peter all your life has been true. This aspect of the faith that I am building here, of the church that I am building here, is also true. It's essentially like Jesus saying, sure shooting or dollar stuffed donuts or any kind of popular thing that kids would say these days to affirm a truth, like bet. I hate to be so dismissive of it, but essentially Jesus said bet. In Islam, Hell or Jahannam is mentioned as having 7 gates. It has 7 gates. For each of those gates is a class of sinners assigned. So 7 comes back a lot as being quite an important number in Trench Crusade. In the Lion of Jabir lore, there's the mention of the Cavern of the Sleeper and the 7 gates of potentiality. Now, the 7 gates of potentiality are super complicated, and you can actually do an entire video about just that if you wanted to, which I don't today at least. But the 7 gates of potentiality is a notion that kind of pops up all over the place. I was quite surprised when I was researching that. The Cavern of the Sleeper is obviously a reference to the Cavern of the 7 Sleepers, because it's literally stated that it's located in Damascus, and there's a cave in Damascus that's considered to be one of the potential sites, basically, if not the site, of the Cavern of the 7 Sleepers. For anybody who doesn't know anything about 7 Sleepers, within kind of Christian and Muslim belief or history or myth or whatever you want to call it, there's a story basically of like 7 young men, and some sources also add in a dog. I choose to assume a dog because story plus dog is better than story minus dog. That they entered a cave to hide from Romans who were looking to persecute them. I can't remember the exact name of the Roman in particular. And they ended up kind of, when they left the cave, that about 309 years, I think it was, had passed. Like they were 3 centuries into the future. And I just find that kind of interesting because it hints not necessarily at time travel in Trench Crusade, even though, the assassins kind of do that in a way, and the assassins kind of fuck with, the concept of like multiverses and stuff. But it definitely gives us the impression that like the laws of physics and reality and stuff are pretty malleable, often through means that the people who are experiencing that malleability don't really understand or comprehend. But anyway, we're sort of sidetracking now. In broader lore, there's the 70 Towers of New Antioch, there's the 17 Martyrs, etc., etc. 7 pops up quite a lot, basically, in religion, in real life theology, and in Trench Crusade. And that's important. We'll get to why that's important shortly. In Judaism, hell is also not really considered a place of punishment, and it's more of a realm of the dead. And the gates of hell are once again seen more as a divider between the living and the dead, much like in the Bible. You know that same kind of concept of it's like a, the gates of hell, the gates of Hades, the gates of whatever. That's just that's just a fence between the living and the dead, in want of a better, more succinct way to say it. But I already said Jesus said bet in this video, so this is definitely not one of my best. Now, the religious concept of the gates of hell as regards the Abrahamic religions is fractured, and it's nothing really like we're seeing in Trench Crusade. It's not these big physical things that exist in the world and demons come out of them and all that kind of shit. That's like a very popular image, I think, because the idea of something being that scary and infringing upon our reality and hell being right there, it all plays into your fears, right? So endless entertainments, even, back to Shakespeare, would have fucked with that kind of stuff, if not like way, way longer, all the way back to the very, very earliest pantheons of gods and everything like that. I'm trying to remember if there was anything reasonably related to hell in like Gilgamesh, but I honestly can't remember. It's been way too long since I thought of or read of or researched Gilgamesh in any way. But they've been around for a long time. So what they all do bring in, though, is the importance of numbers. We can take like the obvious pattern that numbers repeat through myth and lore and theologies of different kinds. and that the devs seem to love this shit in Trench Crusade. They love referential numbers in that same way, especially when it comes to hell. In hell, you've got the 66 heretic domains, you've got Kobar, the first tyrant of the 66, you've got 1666, the year of 6 woes when Gibraltar fell, you've got naval raiders having 66 hours of breathable gas in their tanks, etc. They fucking love it. They love that shit. They're also really like using real world references to stuff. So the Devil's Punch Bowl, which is the site in Kerry in Ireland where Zakura and whatnot opened up the Gate of Hell when they were invading Ireland. It's called that because in myth, basically the chieftain of the O'Donohues was dining with the devil there and got mad at the devil and smacked him and legged it and did a runner, and the devil bit a lump out of the mountain and spat it after him. That's the lore, right? It's actually connected to the devil. And there's places like that all over the world. There's an endless supply of Devil's Punch Bowls and Gates of Hell and Devil's doorknobs and all kinds of stuff basically around the planet that they could land on if they really wanted a new place to put one of these things. And the northern gate is obviously, it's in Kola, and it's almost certainly a reference to the Kola super deep borehole, which is essentially the deepest hole on the planet, and it goes down like 40,000 feet or 12,000 meters, and that's pretty close to hell if you think about it. If you go with the old, hell is the center of the earth and everybody's like hot and it's everybody's like being tormented down there. That's as close as we've been able to get. And by we, I don't mean me. I wasn't out there digging shit. I mean the royal we, humanity. And then we've got Jerusalem, which is the most obvious site for a Gate of Hell in a game about a weird version of the Abrahamic religions. So the devs have shown repeatedly that they're willing to take inspiration from real life locations with names that connect to hell and the devil, etc. And there's like hundreds of that all over the planet. They're also happy to just make connections to cool stuff like a crazy deep hole that exists for whatever reason it exists. I actually don't know that much about it. The most interesting one to me, though, is something that I've been brewing with for a long time, and it's like thinking about the gate in Jerusalem and why Jerusalem. Obviously, in a game, like I just said about Abrahamic religions, you're going to land on Jerusalem. But what about Jerusalem is it that makes Jerusalem the place? And I think you can tie a lot of threads together here if you want to join me in a theory. So I think the killing of Christ in Jerusalem, that act of sacrilege was, Garden of Gethsemane, design or not, supposed to happen or not, was such a sin against God that it wore creation thin where it occurred, creating the potential for the Hellgate to be there in the first place. And that's why it's the biggest one and the most stable one, and that it doesn't move, because it's hard to think of a bigger crime against God and God's creation and God's love for mankind than the killing of his son. Ultimately, it's representative of all the negative aspects of mankind, all the baser elements of our being, all the things that we cannot overcome. Truly, that's the one. And whether it had to happen for our sins and all the rest of it, that doesn't fucking matter. We'll get to that in a future video. Once again, fatalism versus determinism is something that we will discuss with regards to Trench Crusade. But for now, we're just going to say that, in my theory anyway, had an erosive effect on the very fabric of reality, and it led to the potential of the gate occurring there. And then you've got the artifact and the slaughter of it, and it all just like coincidentally or by plan or whatever, doesn't matter, it all leads to the same thing. And this huge gate can open. But I don't think there was anything from the earthly side of things that demanded that gate be there, or that forced that gate to be there, or that gate was always destined to be there since the dawn of creation. I think a huge amount of things occurred to make it be there. Now, where it gets really interesting is that people have often questioned and wondered, why would heaven sign, essentially sign, I guess, a deal like the Covenant to stop angelic things and heavenly things, etc., from being on earth, unless there was true demons there. And I think that was almost a safety clause in a way. I think as long as an act of sacrilege gross enough can potentially be committed, it's possible to create new stable gate sites. And that's one of the reasons why they were loath to send troops and angels and all that kind of stuff to Earth. And they worked out the covenant preventing true demons and angels from being on Earth in the first place. Because if you've got like a true demon and a true angel and they're scrapping it out, there's the chance the angel can die. And if the angel dies, maybe that will form the potentia for another stable gate. And just a pet theory, just something that I find interesting and fun. And were I doing any kind of poking and prodding around Trench Crusade from the point of view of an official lore foundation, I'd fuck with that. I'd probably sit down with everybody and get their thoughts on that one, because I think it's fun and cool and interesting. Now, we also need to talk about my general theory of the Gates of Hell, which I do semi-regularly. I've mentioned over multiple videos now that I feel like the energy of creation and faith and goetic magic and all that kind of stuff, it's just physics and math and chemistry. Like those sciences are the dumbed down versions of those things, of the act of creation and faith and goetic magic and all that kind of stuff. There's things that fit within our puny water and salt bag brains and allow us to comprehend the elements of the world around. So I believe that we can apply essentially, now this is kind of ridiculous, but let's just have a laugh. I believe that we can apply the law of the conservation of energy to goetic magic. You can't just create more of it out of nothing. Energy can either be created or destroyed, or it can neither be created or destroyed. I should say it's merely converted from one form to another. That's one of the reasons that hell wants souls and can't just smash the earth into oblivion or send down its armies through the gates, etc., because they need a supply of people to replace the souls that they keep burning in hell. And they need X amount of energy to send Y amount of mass through the gates, right? I've spoken before, and I feel there's two limiting factors on what can come through the gates. There's the politics of hell on one side, deciding who does and doesn't have access to the gates and all that kind of shit. And then there is the simple physical limitations that you can't just endlessly transform mass. It doesn't work that way. If you want to walk down the street, you're burning fucking calories. So, same rules apply. Like, energy must come from somewhere. You can't just magic it up, even if we are going to use the word magic in the name of in the game of Trench Crusade. Magic is just being used as a kind of a catch-all for you don't understand this shit because you're human, and these guys are demons, and they see geometry that you don't see, and speak in trigonometry and jerk off in algebra. You know what I mean? Like, it's just magic. Of course, it's magic. If you're human, everything's magic. If you're human, so basically, I wanted to cover like all that because I just wanted to talk about the gates of hell in a more generalized sense. But the question at hand, meaning how many gates of hell are there in Trench Crusade, I strongly feel that the answer to this is going to be 66. I think all the hints are there. I think the concept of a recurring 66 has been used enough where it's something that I imagine the devs are going to apply to the gates of hell, and that those 66 gates will be the three different types that we've discussed and potentially unknown types as well. And I think the vast majority of them will be closed. What it will allow the devs to do, both lore-wise and game development-wise, is have gates where they're needed, but not have such a proliferation of gates that the whole system starts to fall apart. I just think that looking at the way they like to use numbers, and everybody would associate 6 with the devil, I think 6 is just too small. We've already had 3. Game's not even out yet. We're still waiting on a rulebook. We've already had 3 gates of hell. So they're going to have like 3 more for the entirety of the rest of the development of the game. I don't fucking think so. And 666 is way too big. So it's not going to be that. But 66 feels just right and would allow for a lot of kind of tactical and lore maneuvering within the world of Trench Crusade. So yeah, there's all my thoughts basically on the gates of hell and where I'm vibing with right now with these big swinging hinges. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'm always really curious to hear your theories. You've got some dope theories that I would just never think of, so please leave them there. As always, like the video only if you actually liked the video. Hit the little bell and the subscribe button if you're new and you want to stick around, and be sure to curate your subscription feed on YouTube. You got to go in there, you got to decide who you're still interested in, and you got to get rid of the people that you don't like. Your subscription feed is where you see the stuff from the people that you want to see it from. That other screen you're looking at, that's just randomized shit. You're not going to fucking see anything there, so think about it. Alrighty, all the best. There'll be more videos this week. I'm really looking forward to publishing them. Thanks so much for watching.